Look around you. A slab of glass in your hand now controls your money, your memories, your identity. Smartphones didn't just change technology, they rewired human behavior. But every empire in this world has a hidden fault line. And in 2007, the ground beneath the greatest phone company on earth quietly began to crack. To understand how fragile dominance truly is, we need to rewind back to a time when phones were indestructible bricks, when batteries lasted a week, when one brand ruled every pocket on the planet. A world where Nokia wasn't competing, it was reigning. At its peak, Nokia controlled nearly half of the global mobile market. Its valuation soared close to $300 billion. It was bigger than Apple and Samsung combined. Inside Nokia headquarters, failure wasn't just unlikely, it was unthinkable. Then came January 2007, a stage, a black turtleneck, and a device that didn't look impressive on paper. No physical keyboard, no copy and paste, no 3G. To Nokia executives, it wasn't a threat, it was a toy. Inside Nokia, confidence turned into dismissal. The phone would shatter when dropped. The battery wouldn't last. Consumers would never accept glass over buttons. The market leader didn't fear disruption, because disruption had never beaten them before. But beneath the polished confidence, something else was forming, not outside the company, inside it. A growing realization that Nokia was standing still while the ground beneath the industry was shifting. And soon, someone would put that fear into words no one could ignore. Years later, a memo would surface. It compared Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil platform, trapped between flames and freezing water. Jump and you might survive. Stay and you will certainly die. It wasn't poetry, it was a warning. This is not a story about weak leadership or bad engineers. It's a story about success turning rigid, about power dulling instincts. And before Nokia became a cautionary tale, before the fall, before the fire, it began in the most unlikely place imaginable. Long before smartphones, software wars, and Silicon Valley rivalries, Nokia made something far simpler, something physical, something humble. To understand how this empire forgot how to adapt, we must go back to where it first learned how. Chapter 2. The Rubber Empire. Long before touchscreens and silicon chips, Nokia's story began in silence. Not in California boardrooms or neon-lit laboratories, but beside a cold Finnish river in the 19th century. No grand ambition, no vision of global dominance, just water, trees, and industry. In 1865, Nokia was born as a paper company. It produced pulp, cardboard, and newspapers, the raw materials of communication, before electricity ever carried a signal. Information once traveled by ink and fiber. Nokia mastered that world first. As decades passed, Nokia did something remarkable. It refused to stay still. The company expanded into rubber manufacturing, boots for farmers, tires for trucks, products designed not for luxury, but survival. Adaptation wasn't strategy. It was instinct. These weren't glamorous products. They didn't change the world overnight. But they taught Nokia something far more valuable: how to build things that last, how to serve everyday people, how to stay relevant in harsh environments. Then came cables, electricity, infrastructure. As Europe wired itself for the future, Nokia followed the current. From rubber to power lines, from paper to connectivity, the company didn't chase trends. It chased necessity. This pattern repeated again and again. When markets shifted, Nokia shifted with them. When industries collapsed, Nokia crossed into new ones. Survival wasn't luck, it was repetition. Reinvention became the company's unspoken religion. By the mid-20th century, Nokia was no longer just a manufacturer. It was an industrial organism, evolving with every decade. The company began experimenting with electronics, quietly, cautiously, unaware it was approaching its true destiny. Radios, military communication systems, early signal technology. Nokia wasn't chasing consumer fame yet. It was learning the language of transmission, how information moves, how signals survive noise, how distance can be conquered. Each transition strengthened the company's confidence. Nokia had reinvented itself too many times to fear change. From forests to factories, from boots to bandwidth, adaptation had always been its greatest weapon. By the 1980s, something extraordinary happened. Telecommunications stopped being an experiment and became an opportunity. And Nokia, once again, arrived early, carrying over a century of industrial discipline into a digital age. This wasn't a lucky pivot. It was the culmination of everything Nokia had learned: durability, scale, engineering, logistics. The company didn't enter telecom as a startup. It entered as a veteran. Few companies in history have reinvented themselves so many times and survived. Fewer still did it across centuries. Nokia wasn't built on innovation alone. It was built on the ability to abandon the past without nostalgia. And when the mobile phone finally arrived, Nokia was ready. Or at least it believed it was. Because the next chapter wouldn't just make Nokia successful, it would make it untouchable. Chapter 3, The Golden Age. By the late 1990s, Nokia wasn't following the future, it was defining it. Mobile phones stopped being tools and became personal artifacts, and everywhere you went, one sound followed you. A melody that quietly announced who truly owned the world. The Nokia ringtone became a global reflex. It echoed through offices, restaurants, movie scenes, and public transport. You didn't ask who was calling, you already knew the brand. Nokia wasn't advertising anymore, it was embedded. In an era before algorithms and notifications, brand power was measured by instinct, and Nokia's instinctive recognition was unmatched. It wasn't just a logo, it was muscle memory. Then came the phone that would outlive legends. The Nokia 3310 didn't bend, it didn't crack. It survived concrete, gravity, and neglect. In a world of fragile electronics, it became indestructible folklore. People joked that the ground would break before the phone did, and the joke carried truth. Nokia had mastered something rare, trust. When people bought a Nokia, they believed it would outlast them. But durability alone didn't create obsession. Nokia understood joy. In a tiny monochrome screen, they hid a game that conquered classrooms, offices, and boredom itself. Snake wasn't entertainment, it was ritual. High scores were traded like currency. Productivity fell silently. Nokia didn't just sell hardware, it captured time. And it did so without needing an app store, an internet connection, or permission. Then came the phone that made Nokia stylish. The Nokia 8110, curved, bold, cinematic. When it appeared in the Matrix, it didn't just ring. It slid open like the future itself. Hollywood validated what consumers already felt. Nokia wasn't boring. It was cool. It belonged in the hands of rebels, hackers, and heroes. The brand had crossed from utility into identity. By the early 2000s, the numbers stopped making sense. Nokia controlled nearly 50% of the global mobile market. 1 out of every 2 phones sold belonged to them. That kind of dominance rewrites psychology. In brand recognition, Nokia rivaled McDonald's and Coca-Cola. It was spoken in every language, carried across every border. Nokia wasn't just a company anymore. It was infrastructure. Inside the company, confidence hardened into belief. They had beaten competitors before. They had survived decades of change. Nokia didn't see itself as a tech firm. It saw itself as inevitable. When you dominate for too long, you stop scanning the horizon. The market becomes background noise. And innovation starts to feel optional, something others need more than you do. Nokia had everything: scale, trust, engineering, distribution. It had conquered hardware, but software was quietly becoming the battlefield. And Nokia didn't hear the drums yet. The golden age didn't end with an explosion. It ended with silence, with success so complete that warning signs blended into background static. And beneath the celebration, something essential was beginning to rot. Because while Nokia celebrated what it had built, the world was quietly preparing for what came next. And the greatest threat to Nokia's empire wasn't a competitor, it was its own comfort. Chapter 4. The Rot Inside. Empires rarely collapse from the outside first. They decay internally, quietly, invisibly. At Nokia, the danger wasn't competition, it was comfort. Success had built walls so thick that reality could no longer get through. Inside Nokia's headquarters, fear became policy. Middle managers learned quickly that bad news was a career-ending mistake. So problems were softened, delays were rebranded as progress, and uncomfortable truths simply disappeared before reaching the top. Meetings became theater. Executives spoke in confidence while silence filled the room beneath them. Engineers knew the truth, but truth had become dangerous. At Nokia, honesty didn't climb the ladder, fear did, and at the heart of everything sat Symbian. Once a strength, now a liability. It wasn't a platform anymore, it was a maze, a tangled web of legacy code stitched together by years of compromise and denial. Updating Symbian wasn't innovation, it was archaeology. Every change broke something else. Simple features took years to ship. While competitors moved fast, Nokia dragged decades of technical debt behind it like an anchor. Engineers warned them, quietly, repeatedly. They saw what was coming. Touchscreens, app ecosystems, software-first phones. But their warnings collided with layers of management trained to protect comfort, not confront danger. Upstairs, the board celebrated past victories, market share, awards, legacy. Meetings ended early. Golf courses filled the afternoons. When success lasts long enough, it stops feeling temporary. It starts feeling deserved. This wasn't ignorance. It was insulation. Nokia's leadership had become isolated from the engineers, the users, and the future. The company still moved, but it no longer listened. Meanwhile, across the industry, software was becoming the soul of the phone. Nokia still believed hardware would save them. Buttons, durability, materials. But the battlefield had shifted. And Nokia hadn't noticed. The company was now a contradiction. Brilliant engineers trapped inside a system that punished urgency. Innovation slowed, not because Nokia lacked talent, but because it feared disrupting itself. Nokia had become a luxury cruise ship, massive, elegant, confident, but below deck, water was already rushing in. And while alarms rang quietly, the music on deck stayed loud. Passengers kept dancing, executives kept smiling, reports stayed optimistic. After all, the ship had survived storms before. No one wanted to be the one who shouted iceberg too early. By the time reality became impossible to hide, it was already embedded in the structure. The problem wasn't one bad decision, it was years of silence stacking on top of success. Nokia hadn't failed yet, but it had stopped adapting. And in technology, that pause is fatal, because the market doesn't wait for internal politics to resolve themselves. While Nokia debated internally, the outside world made its move. And in January 2007, the iceberg finally revealed itself, not as a warning, but as a collision. Chapter 5: The iPhone Moment. January 9th, 2007. The room was quiet, controlled, almost ceremonial. A single figure stepped forward in a black turtleneck, holding something that looked unfinished, a smooth piece of glass with no buttons demanding attention. History often arrives looking small. There were no specs shouted, no bravado, just a promise that this object would redefine how humans touch technology. A phone, an iPod, an internet communicator, not three devices, one idea. What mattered wasn't what the device could do that day. It was what it suggested about tomorrow. Software first, touch first, experience first. A phone designed not around buttons, but around the human hand. Across the world, inside Nokia's offices, the reaction was not fear. It was laughter. Engineers took the device apart with screwdrivers and smug expressions. What they saw confirmed their bias. Or so they believed. No 3G, they said. The battery life was terrible. The glass would shatter the first time it hit concrete. This wasn't a threat, it was a niche product for enthusiasts and executives with fragile hands. Nokia judged the future using the rules of the past: specs over experience, durability over delight, checklists over intuition. They didn't ask how the phone felt, only how it compared on paper. What Nokia missed was simple and fatal. The device wasn't finished, it was a platform. And platforms don't win by being perfect on day one. They win by evolving faster than anyone else can react. As Apple refined software, competitors chased features. As ecosystems grew, Nokia defended hardware. The center of gravity shifted, and Nokia stayed where it was, convinced the world would come back. When the market began to move, Nokia rushed a response. Internally, it was called the answer. Externally, it was marketed as the iPhone killer. The Nokia N97 was meant to prove they still understood the future. But the illusion collapsed the moment people touched it. Slow software, lagging screens, crashes, a keyboard fighting a touchscreen that never truly worked. It wasn't innovation, it was compromise wrapped in denial. Reviewers were brutal, consumers were confused. The phone that was meant to restore confidence did the opposite. It confirmed the fear. Nokia was no longer leading, it was reacting. Trust, once broken, doesn't shatter loudly, it erodes quietly, one bad experience at a time. And for the first time in decades, people began asking a dangerous question. What if Nokia wasn't the safe choice anymore? Apple didn't defeat Nokia with a single device. It defeated them by changing expectations. Phones were no longer tools, they were experiences, and Nokia's worldview was now obsolete. By the time Nokia realized this wasn't a passing trend, the ecosystem had formed. Developers, users, momentum, all flowing in one direction, and Nokia was standing still, watching it pass. The industry had spoken, loudly, clearly, and now Nokia faced a choice it had never truly faced before: jump into freezing waters, or stay on a platform already burning. Chapter 6: The Burning Platform. By 2010, the denial had burned away, market share was collapsing, confidence followed, and for the first time in its history, Nokia looked outside its own culture for salvation. A new leader arrived, and he didn't inherit a throne, he inherited a fire. Stephen Elop was the first non-Finnish CEO Nokia had ever chosen, an outsider walking into a sealed ecosystem of tradition, fear, and inertia. What he saw wasn't subtle. The platform wasn't smoldering. It was already burning. Weeks into the job, Elop did what few dared to do before him. He wrote it down. No softened language, no corporate optimism, just a brutal metaphor meant to shock an entire organization awake. "We are standing on a burning platform," the memo read, "surrounded by flames. Stay, and the fire consumes you. Jump, and the icy waters might kill you. But staying guarantees death." The memo wasn't leaked by accident. It spread through Nokia like shockwaves. Engineers felt validated. Executives felt exposed. The comfort of denial evaporated overnight. Now came the choice that would define Nokia's future. Symbian was dead. There was no time left to rebuild from scratch. The company stood before two doors, each leading to a radically different fate. Door A was Android, proven, expanding, already winning, but choosing it meant becoming one of many. Another face in the crowd, competing on price, speed, and scale against Samsung and Google itself. Door B was Windows Phone, untested, cold, risky, but exclusive. With Microsoft, Nokia wouldn't be just another manufacturer. It would be different, special, recognizable again. This was the logic. Android meant survival without distinction. Windows meant identity. If it worked, Nokia chose to jump not toward safety, but toward uniqueness. A partnership was signed in the shadows, handshakes exchanged under cold lights. To the world it looked strategic. Inside Nokia, it felt like leaping into freezing water, hoping shock wouldn't stop the heart. The decision was irreversible. Nokia had abandoned its past and bet its future on someone else's ecosystem. There would be no second jump, no turning back to the platform. Nokia had jumped, and for a brief moment, the world held its breath. But survival in freezing water requires strength, speed, and luck, and Nokia was running out of all three. Chapter 7. The Fall and Sale. By 2013, the struggle was over, not with a bang, but with paperwork. Years of dominance ended in boardrooms and legal filings. The mobile division of Nokia was sold to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. Once unimaginable, now unavoidable. The number was shocking not because it was small, but because of what it replaced. Nokia had once been valued near $300 billion. In less than a decade, 96% of its value had evaporated into history. Factories closed, hallways emptied, offices that once buzzed with confidence fell silent. For thousands of employees, Nokia wasn't just a company. It was a lifetime. And now it was ending without explanation. At the press conference, executives sat stiffly under unforgiving lights, faces calm, eyes exhausted. One sentence captured everything they couldn't explain. We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. There were no villains left to blame, no single fatal mistake to point at, just a quiet realization. The world had changed faster than Nokia could move, and strength had failed where adaptability was required. Soon after, the name itself disappeared. Microsoft dropped the Nokia brand from its phones. A word once spoken in every language faded into corporate memory. The king wasn't dethroned, it was erased.